and welcome to Mastering Dungeons. I am one of your two usual hosts, Teos Abadia. Shawn Merwin is currently in the maw of a really dangerous monster, and as soon as he's done inspecting it and capturing its stat block accurately, he'll come back to our realm and record podcasts again. But that is our luck, because I am joined today by Mario Ortegón. Hello, Mario.
Hi, thank you for having me, and thank you for saying my name correctly.
Well, it's easier for me. So you're known as El Warias on Twitter and Twitch. You are an amazing designer. I know this because I've seen your work before a lot of people ever got to see work. You're also an excellent DM and streamer. Your work recently appeared, I think this is your debut, correct me if I'm wrong, in Arcadia, the awesome magazine by MCDM for 5th edition.
It is my debut after, working for a year in many other projects that I can talk about. This is the first one that's out, and it's very awesome.
Sweet. Well, I'm looking forward to a lot of it. We're going to talk later about your work. We'll look at the Arcadia article, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about that. But we will start with some news. This is going to feel like the Kickstarter review episode, and I didn't mean it to be that way, nor did Shawn, but just there's a lot of news about Kickstarters. So, but the first item is not, and that is that both Dungeons & Dragons and Baldman Games have sent out surveys. The Baldman Games one, very easy. Highly recommend you do it. It's all about Winter Fantasy. Link is in our show notes. Winter Fantasy will be February 2nd to 6th of next year. I'm going to be there, pretty sure. And it is also going to have an online component. It requires proof of vaccination. Masks may be required. That's one of the questions that's in this survey. It also asks about the types of games you're interested in playing. Mario, have you been to a U.S. convention yet?
I've been to PAX.
Oh,
yeah,
PAX.
But I've heard you talk about Winter Fantasy, and I think the first time we met at PAX, you mentioned that it was your favorite convention, and then the year that I was planning on going, the world just exploded. So so yeah, it's good that it's back, in person this year, I guess.
Yeah, I think as it starts getting a little safer, these things become available, and it's the question of how everybody feels about it. With vaccination being required, I feel a lot better about it. We were at Gamehole Con, Shawn and I, and mask wearing was perfect, and vaccination was required, so that made me really happy. I'm all for masks. I didn't find that it hurt play at all, so I hope that Winter Fantasy will use masks. It'll make me feel more comfortable. We'll see. But at least vaccination is a good start, and we'll see what the numbers look like. They're getting better. So
yeah, it's awesome that they're, venturing, to just go ahead and do it and see how it is. Several, not several. Specifically one convention that I was looking for, PAX South, which is the one in Texas that is the most accessible ones to us. It got shut down.
It's gone, and they're not doing.
Yeah, so it's good to see folks, just trying stuff out and trying to keep it alive.
Yeah. Well, so another survey that folks can take is the Dungeons & Dragons survey. It was on their Twitter, and we've got a link here to it as well. It's also, if you go in the link that you may have received, if you subscribe to their newsletter, you'll get an email, and that link has a bunch of different languages available. I took it in English. What about you, Mario? Did you?
I took it in Spanish, yeah, because I'm basically just trying to add to the numbers to make WotC see that we're out here. But that's actually, it's really exciting because they've finally started to put out content in Spanish and reach out to creators in Spanish, and it's starting to look like they're trying to to reach this market.
We can order the books. At our local gaming store. Mine I don't have my books yet, but they've been ordered by my local store.
Right.
And hopefully they'll let me know soon.
Yeah, the dream here in Mexico would be for them to be able to be just ordered from Amazon, like exactly the same, the way you can order, the regular books. Because in Mexico we don't have a lot of stores, like specialized stores.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of like, removing a barrier. But, just them being available at stores is also, I mean, people who can cross the border or have family there, I mean, they have it more accessible.
Yeah, I'm curious how easy it is. So like what part of it is the information isn't out there, which is a problem. But like I went to my local gaming store and I said, "Can you order these?" And they said, "What are you talking about?" And then I gave them the actual codes, and they were like, "Oh yeah, okay, we can order these." But they didn't just know. And so I'm curious, like, can you go to like, I don't know, the equivalent of a Barnes and Noble,
right,
in Mexico, and say like, "Here are the codes. Order this. Can you order this?"
Yeah.
Does it just work like a normal book? I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. That's worth looking into. I mean, we do have. I mean, in the city that I live in, at least there are pretty big book chains. I guess that sort of like Barnes and Noble. So you just
that'd be an interesting
you just gave me an idea. I'm gonna try to reach out to them.
Yeah. But then the thing is, well, how do you get that news out to everybody, right? Including the store, because if the store doesn't even know, so it's there's a lot there. But I agree with you. Yeah. It's nice to see this, getting some energy behind it, and
it's awesome.
So this survey, it has a bunch of questions. It has the usual stuff like what's your favorite setting, your favorite races, all that kind of stuff, classes. Then it asks about how often you DM and play. How you learned about the game and about 5e. And then it has some interesting questions about which books you own and in what format, so digital versus paper kind of thing. And even asks you whether they're partners, D&D Beyond, Roll20, and Fantasy Grounds, only those three. Each one, it asks you to say, are they rising, falling, or holding steady?
Yep.
I thought that was a really strange set of questions.
Yeah, I guess... I don't know. Is it just for them to get to gauge what people believe the products look like on other platforms, or because there are rumors of them just trying to launch their own thing, right? So yeah,
I think that's the question, right? Are they? And I think Shawn liked to say, like, there's always the difference between people at Wizards who are just designing, right, and then there are people who are managers of those, and then there are the executives above that. And all of those folks can have a different opinion, right? And a different answer to this question. Or some of those may not know anything. They're just doing their work. But my guess is that there's some folks up there at the top that see this question, the answer to this question can be the grounds by which you decide to change your agreements, right? And that's where it gets dangerous, because surveys, they don't produce the best data, right? And I would hate for somebody who just, if you happen to use one platform or another, and so you mark the other one as you think it's fine,
right.
Like, well, what do you know, right? So it's a I don't know. I worry about what this indicates.
It's also like, does it mention all? Does it mention all three and ask you to rank all three? You're not ranking them against each other. You're for each one saying, like, say D&D Beyond. Is it rising, falling, or holding steady? And I don't remember if those are the exact terms, but that's the idea, right? Are they doing well or poorly, or the same as always? Yeah, because
give me bad
the thing that you mentioned, I think people usually go to one platform and kind of like stick to it, right? Because it's an investment to move from one to the other. So I could see, that kind of like tribalism of, oh, my platform, I'm going to rank it higher, and the others, I'm going to rank it lower just because. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what they're going to do with that.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Unrelated news, the Paizo Union, we talked about it. I think the last time that Shawn and I talked about it was when we were at GameholeCon recording. And back then, that was just before it was recognized. So just for anybody who missed the news, Paizo has recognized the union, and now they're in the negotiation phase where they figure out how to work together and what people should be paid and what kind of levels and so on, so that it's all fair. So that's good. We look forward to hearing more of that.
Yeah, it's groundbreaking.
And now some sadder news, which is the finale of the C Team. This is the Acquisitions Incorporated show that started as a sort of complement to the main stage show. This was the C Team, sort of the idea of a B team or C team. And this is a show that has been a real fan favorite for a lot of us. It's going to end November 17th at 4 p.m. You can see the last episode, which is done live, is my understanding. And I'm sure it's going to be very emotional for the players. The players have one of those groups who just see a real obvious chemistry when they play together, and it's been a lot of years. So I think that's going to be a really interesting final episode. I'm looking forward to it. Both looking forward to it and dreading it.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned this particular group. It was both their kind of like shenanigans group, and also it had the unique DMing style of Jerry, which I mean will be. I don't know if he's doing anything else, but if he's not, it'll be missed, right? Because it's kind of unique.
I sure hope so. I have to believe they have something planned and that we'll see, most or all of them together in some way. But still, every time there's a change, that's still a lot.
Right.
So we'll see. But yeah, I love the way Jerry just speaks and DMs is just, it's amazing.
Yeah.
His brain is incredible. So now let's get into Kickstarter land. I'll try to go through these pretty quickly. The first is the ENWorld Level Up Kickstarter. Just ended. And it ended almost $1 million, which is really impressive. And as usual for ENWorld Morris Kickstarters, the moment it ended, he sent everybody their PDFs, which is a kind of neat way to do it. You know that when you back it, you're getting it. The early design has seen a lot of praise because it deliberately tries to sort of tweak 5th edition for what players and DMs have been saying they'd like to see. And it makes me think about, how different is this, or how similar is this to what we might see with the revised edition that Wizards has been talking about doing, right? A 5.5 or a 6e.
That'll be interesting. Also, like the, how, if it'll, I guess, I don't know if he's mentioned this before, but like if 5e changes dramatically between now and when they apply those changes, are they going to go and just move things around, or is this what it is once it's out? Yeah.
It's fascinating. Yeah, I'm very curious. And it is interesting for third-party publishers how they'll have to adapt to this landscape, right? What do you do with all of your, MCDM, anybody, right? To what extent do you do that? And there's always the risk, if it changes too much, will some publishers go like, okay, I'm going to do something else.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's done in a way that energizes everybody and gets people motivated. So far, everything we've seen that are tweaks like monster stat blocks, those are not a big deal if you don't have them, and not too hard to add. So we'll see.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I hope it's just what you mentioned, and also like bringing all of the quality of life things that they've introduced in Tasha's into the core game. To me, that would be the dream, but I don't know if they've noticed another need that needs to be covered, right?
Yeah, we'll see. So Shotguns and Sorcery is a Kickstarter that is currently live. You have until November 16th, so when you hear this, you'll just have a few days. This was something that Shawn and I both got to play the 5th edition version of, which is what's being kickstarted when we were at Gamehole. Very fun game. It's got a neat focused city campaign where everybody is in this one dragon city surrounded by zombies. So it's sort of been a zombie apocalypse that a necromancer caused. And you are in this city, and the city is very stratified. And you could say it's unfair under the rule of the dragon and how certain classes control things. But how do you mount a rebellion when your city's surrounded by zombies? And to add to this, not only is it got this sort of noir feel, but it also has pulp aspects with shotguns and other weapons. And I was really pleased when I played it. Every character had neat aspects that tied them into the setting. So like my rogue had the ability not only to shoot a shotgun for a ton of damage, but I could also create like Molotov cocktails and other improvised explosives as sort of my class feature.
Yeah.
So
this is my jam.
Highly recommended. And it's November 16th. Another sort of pulpy setting is Planegea. And this is a Kickstarter by Atlas Games. Shawn and I were sent a full preview. Very cool setting, very interesting possibilities for creating compelling campaigns in a primeval setting. So this is like dinosaurs, things like that. In fact, almost like, what if you were cavemen, right? And there are a number of ways I can think of running this campaign that would be really neat. This ends November 18th. So again, very little time to check it out and back it.
This one, I saw something very interesting, which was, I think it presents kind of like the elves and dwarves and all of the, fantasy races at their origins. So, it looks like if you're going to see elves, they're going to be like super, like hyper fantasy elves, right? Like the ones that still shift around and are dreamlike and stuff like that. And I think the dwarves come out of the earth, like literally. It's very interesting. The ideas that it's bringing.
Yeah, it's really cool. It is that idea of like, if you went back in time, what would your campaign look like? Like really went back in time. And the classes are sort of that way too. Like you get almost proto classes that you start with, and that's kind of neat. Next is Potbellied, Kobold's Guide to Villains and Lairs. This Kickstarter is by Jeff Stevens, prolific adventure designer, well known for super fun adventures on the DM's Guild. Really nice guy. Jeff's 5e supplement has 30 villainous NPCs and 10 unique layers to add to your game. Several of the evocative NPCs are showcased on the Kickstarter page with their art and brief descriptions. This also ends November 18th.
Awesome. You know what the problem is with all these Kickstarters? I wish I could back them all.
Yes, that is exactly the problem.
There's so many.
And that's a good segue into Reliquaries by Dwarven Forge. This is hand-painted dice thrones. And at first I thought, oh, cool, Dwarven Forge is doing something other than terrain, so I can ignore this. And then I looked at it and said, oh, I can't ignore this. Because they're like, on one hand, it sounds like, oh, okay, I don't need this. So it's like a little throne that you can put your dice on.
Right.
And I'm like, whatever, I don't need that. But then I'm like, oh, it looks really cool. I mean, I kind of wouldn't mind putting one D20 on it. And then I'm like, oh, and look, this one comes with like a little dial, so I could use it as a like time tracker when there's like a pressure situation. And then this other one can be used as another type of counter. And before you knew it, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm backing this.
That's how they get
really
you.
Good. They're like different. Yeah, that's how they get you. They're different models. Like the thrones or the heroes are LED lit. And so there's like a dwarf that's, smacking an anvil down and a phoenix, and they all light up. And then there are others that are lower priced, and they come in themes like dwarf, elven, eldritch, elemental, artificer. Yeah, you have until November 19th to check this out and fall under its trap. It's beautiful. And I've worked with the Dwarven Forge people, so that's both a bias and me saying they're wonderful people and you should back them because they deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of wonderful people, 2C Gaming is has launched their Rewards and Rarities Kickstarter. This is all about magic items and treasures from mundane to wondrous, including like revised tables for rewards and guidance on how to make rewards meaningful for players and characters. There is a promo here that you can download to take a look. This one ends December 5th. Celeste Konowich is leading the project. She's been on the show before. Fantastic work.
She's awesome.
Another awesome person, Rich Lescaflair, is one of the fantastic designers for Alligator Alley, and they are launching Expedition from the Mysterious Peaks. This Kickstarter, in case you didn't hear it in the title, it's like Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, the famous sci-fi
with the aliens,
that Gygax wrote. Yeah, so Alligator Alley and Rich Lescaflair are renowned for this Espergenesis sci-fi game that uses the 5th edition engine, and everything is sort of feels like 5e, but also feels super sci-fi. So it's really easy. If you play 5e, you can literally be handed a character sheet and you can, roll a d20 immediately. Like, you know what to do because it's still initiative, it's still an attack roll, and it's a pistol instead of a crossbow, right? Really easy, and you have sort of Esper powers that are magic or high tech, and so it's a very easy way of explaining how things work. And for this Kickstarter, it is a kind of like the classic module. It's a bit of both things, both mundane and in sci-fi, which allows you to use just 5th edition or fully Espergenesis or even a mix.
Ooh, that's cool.
Really cool idea. So it makes it very easy. You can do it even if you've never purchased any of the Espergenesis books, which are all super awesome. So you have until December 9th for this one. I highly recommend this, and Rich absolutely deserves your money. So check it out.
Yeah, I played Esper Genesis, and it's great. I mean, it's awesome how far you can get with just like reflavoring everything. Everything just feels completely different. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. I love the Esper concept and the different species, and they have a sort of version of the Dragonborn that's really cool, and it's really neat stuff. So, leaving Kickstarter world for our last piece of news related to Adventurers League, they have announced in a blog post from Chris Tulloch the Wild Beyond the Witchlight Adventures, and sort of explained how their campaign settings work for Adventurers League. And there are basically now 3 types of campaigns. Expansion campaigns, which have a connected storyline like Eberron Oracle War and Ravenloft Mist Hunters. Event campaigns, which are like Dreams of the Red Wizards, sort of like a storyline that's independent of actual official products. And then the adapted campaigns, which is your how you take a published adventure and play it. So like for the Witchlight campaign. So those blog posts, which we have show links in our show notes to, those blog posts break down what adventures are available, and including free adventures. So you can go and download these adventures that let you play the beginning of the Witchlight carnival scene with a 3-hour adaptation or a 2-hour adaptation called Lost Things, which is really cool. It takes the idea that you are playing your character way back when you first went to the carnival. And so you play essentially like a 0-level character.
Oh, that's awesome.
And you go on this mini carnival adventure, and then you can come back later as your fully grown person and explore it again.
Do those products, is this the first time that they do this with a published product, like adapted for, like directly for Adventure League, or no?
Sort of. They haven't done it for a while. Back when it was like Tyranny of Dragons, so the very beginning of 5th edition, the first few adventures had a version for stores, which sort of replaced the D&D Encounters program. Right. And so you could play essentially like the first chapter or 2 as a sort of way to get started. And then what people would do is they would just run the rest of the adventure anyway. So this is sort of that way as well.
Okay.
And in fact, if you go to like play games on the Yawning Portal site that are the virtual weekends, they are running now not just these, but also the book itself. So you can just find a DM and play through different chapters of the game.
That's awesome. I mean, I guess this would be a way to just like play test and see if you like the product before you play it.
That's a good point. It's not
amazing.
Bad. And I love this adventure. Every time I open it and look at it, it's one of my favorite.
Beautiful.
Adventures.
Everything about it.
Great design. Yep. One last thing that I'll add here, which is that the FAQ document has been updated. It's now version 11.1. This is the document that's kind of for like more of your hardcore AL person that wants to look up special details and rules. So it's things like what happens if you have a spell that creates a permanent item, or which magic items are allowed from hardback adventures. So all of that can be found in the FAQ document, and all of the documents that govern Adventurers League play can be found on the D&D website. If you just pull down and go to the main organized play page, you will find that all those documents there.
Amazing.
Yeah, not bad. All right, so Mario, you are our main topic.
Am I? Oh my God.
You are. Well deserved. So let's start with your origin story. Tell us about yourself and how you came to be involved in tabletop RPGs.
Well, about myself, I am a designer and a streamer from Mexico. I guess I started getting involved in the whole actual play scene back in 2016. I think was the first time when we started sort of experimenting and just like trying to bring in a format that was back then it was still kind of growing in English, in the English world, on streaming, basically. Critical Role was kind of getting their stride, and but I guess Acquisitions Incorporated was already a big deal back then. They had many years of their podcast. So taking inspiration from that, me and some friends began to sort of stream our own, game, and it started as many games do, being sort of a mess. Sure. Yeah, I think the first episode we don't have audio for the first half, so I had to like dub what was happening on voiceover. So yeah, so basically I, fast forward, a couple of years later, people from WotC began to notice what I was doing, because back then, and this is no longer the case anymore, but back then my channel was the only one kind of like doing actual play content in Spanish for Mexico. So, they started noticing what I was doing. I started to get invited to events, brought into the community. They offered me a spot for a game hosted on Saturdays on their channel, Trece Albas. And, all along that journey, I was sort of creating content, both, in the form of streaming and also in the form of writing for myself and for the games that I was running. I was creating a world that basically required me to sort of like think through all of this. How would D&D work if I wanted to shape it for what I want to present, which is basically this world that I made that was inspired by the legends that I grew up listening to. It's called Ixalba. And yeah, so we, I gradually began to release this to the world in Spanish to the audience that was kind of like already following me. So it was very kind of like, oh, here's something I'm doing. It was free. I never sort of like expected anything to come from it. It was mostly to answer, because we played these things, right? And people would say like, oh, what is that? How did you do that monster? Or what is that class? Or what, how do I do this if I want to do this in my game? So I started releasing them as, these Google Docs that, hey, here's how I did it. And then, from there, to make a long story short, I basically started kind of like iterating on that. And eventually I began designing. I started noticing that people were interested in the English communities that I was being brought into. So I started writing in English, and seeing the reaction of the people, I basically learned, again, through many interactions and feedback, both good and bad, what I was doing or how to shape what I was doing to sort of fit what people wanted in the D&D world or category for design. And yeah, I guess eventually 2020 was kind of like the how do you say, like the point where everything changed for me. So I started having trouble with my job, and basically I opened a Patreon where I started publishing what I was doing as a way for me to have an additional sort of a income source while I looked for something else. People liked it, and unbeknownst to me, some people who were looking at my stuff there were sharing it with other people who also liked it, and basically they brought me into some projects that are amazing, including Arcadia, which I guess we're going to talk about in a little bit, but it's just been weird and wild, and everything has just been kind of like very stumbling into things, but yeah. I'm loving it.
Well, that's awesome. So, you and I, back around that time when more than a year ago, when you and I started talking about maybe we do something together, and you showed me this subclass. And it's funny because I thought like, okay, I know he has great ideas because I've seen the stream. The stream has these awesome, really cool, creative concepts. I knew you were building all this. But one of the things that often happens with newer people that, you know, don't have like years of obvious design is they may not know how to like format things or address things so that it's a professional design. And especially when you come from another language, there can be that barrier of knowing like what is the English way to do this thing, right? What is the D&D language in English? And when I saw your design, I was like, oh man, like this is so good. Like this is like really, really good. And I told you that, and you may not have believed me, but I was like, oh, this is like ready. Like you could just hit publish. Like this is, the language is tight. The design is tight. And so I've been telling anyone who'll listen, like, oh, you know, you need someone to work that, you know, is good. This guy, what have they written? Well, nothing you can see yet, but trust me. That's really funny because finally now I can say, okay, look at this article from Arcadia Magazine, and then they'll go, okay, yeah, I see that. That's great.
Yeah, that is actually, it was very weird to me going from basically publishing stuff privately to a captive audience, which already liked my stuff, right? It was like, I'm sharing this with you. I mean, people were obviously, you know, getting into the Patreon to support me because I was in a difficult position. So as a thanks, I basically started publishing this to them. So, you know, there were many people who were fans of what I was doing already, but many of them were also, I guess, were new to what I was doing and were only there to support, which I'm really deeply appreciative of. And yeah, it was just wild going from publishing privately to just working on some big projects, because as you mentioned, it's been a year of trying to, so all of the work that I've gotten has been through references. And when I talk to someone, I have to be sort of very careful, because either if someone approaches me for a job, they will basically say, I mean, send me writing samples, right? And most of what I send is what I already had. And I also had to basically just craft new stuff specifically for that, because I didn't have published credits. So, and also like another thing is that, you know, it hasn't stopped. So I haven't been able to actually, like, I mean, you would say like, oh, just go to DM's Guild and publish something. What's the problem? But it hasn't stopped. But you're too busy. I haven't been able to just like, I've been trying to, but yeah, it's been wild, and it's been obviously a privilege and a blessing. This is kind of like, you know, while I recognize that it's the result of many years of work, I also realize that this is not the norm, right? Like people work hard for years to get opportunities like this, and I'm lucky to have people looking at my stuff and thinking it's good enough to be brought into these projects. But yeah,
how has it been for you being a designer in Mexico? Like, do you find that creates barriers? Is it harder to get recognized?
A little bit. It's, I guess, so one thing that happens to me very often is, because I'm starting to get credits now that Arcadia is published, and recently I was invited to do a panel for Big Bad Con, speaking about the last year when I've been freelancing, and all of this is exposing me to sort of like new people, right? And they see and know me from this work that is in English, and they follow me on Twitter, and they see me posting in Spanish, and they immediately unfollow. So it's weird. I'm kind of like stuck in between two worlds, because obviously I don't want to stop posting in Spanish. I don't want to lose that part of the community. But also, like, I'm actually getting to the point on my Twitter following where I think I'm about like 58% English followers at this point. So it's tipping towards English speaking people. So I have started doing something I never did before, which is tweeting in English, just to try to communicate with this community that is sort of like approaching me, I guess.
It's almost like you need two accounts.
Yeah.
Which would be infuriating and maddening, and I wouldn't want that.
Yeah, it's hard because also like I'm not at a point where like I don't have a super big following yet, right? But like if this is one of the things where if I open a new account, do I leave this one for the English speaking people, or do I do the new one for the English speaking people?
Right.
Like, yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah. But I'm navigating it. A lot of the folks that have, folks that have seen my work and have approached me with comments have been very nice. Like I would say like 90% of the experiences have been positive. Yeah, it's kind of, I'm still trying to navigate that, that part of how, like, where do I go? I'm kind of like in the middle right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's something that any Latinx designer, streamer has to worry about. And especially as you start getting bigger in a English speaking market, which is the bigger market. That's the thing, is the money is in English,
definitely.
right? And that's a hard thing for us to deal with, because you and I have talked about this before. Like, I would love to publish in Spanish. I know you would love to publish in Spanish, but right now the market is in a place where there aren't a lot of people buying things in Spanish. Especially on places like DM's Guild, but it's just it's not there yet, that kind of culture or even the pricing that would work in different countries. And so it's very hard to establish that, which is a shame. And then it forces us to be living in an English world.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've been working on a personal project for, the world that I mentioned, Ixalva. We've been kind of like developing that as a setting for about a year. It got delayed because of things, life things, as things do. But we've been pondering that very question, right? Because I would, like, honestly, in my heart, I feel like this product needs to be in Spanish, right? It has to be in Spanish. If it's not in Spanish, I'm gonna hate myself. However, in order for it to be in Spanish, I first need to completely develop it in English, play test it multiple times, change everything that needs to be changed in English, because it's going to be a nightmare if I write it in both languages. I'm going to have to be basically maintaining two versions of the game, and that's nightmarish. And I'm one person, so
twice the work, and you won't be able to charge twice the amount.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, that's something that weighs heavily on my mind, and
for sure,
it's there.
I understand that. Even with my the small adventure that my son and I wrote, we've been playtesting it and all that kind of thing, and I would love to launch it in Spanish, but it's like, it doesn't even work as a stretch goal. Like, hey, American English speaker, if you back more, I'll give it to you in a language you can't use. Wait, that doesn't work.
Right.
So it's kind of funny. And it's like, well, and also a lot of people who are good, like, to translate something into Spanish, you want to use the language of the game in Spanish. And if you think of it in English, things like how we describe a saving throw, or, half on a success, that kind of thing, all those words, they have their counterparts in Spanish that are very specific. So you want somebody who knows that, because you can't just literally translate it. You can't choose a translator. It's got to be a translator who knows D&D. So they're going to want to charge you a decent amount of money for that.
Exactly.
Which then is more than you can sell it for a lot of times. So it's very hard.
Yeah. It's it's a problem, and many even still, with all of those barriers, right now there's people like making products in Spanish and trying to sort of like grow that scene as much as possible. If I'm ever in a position where I have the time and sort of like the resources to just sort of like give this, because being realistic, it would be giving something, right? Because as you said, it's not something that will, at least at the beginning, sort of pay off in a way. I'll definitely want to do it. That is something that many Latinx creators do, I guess, because that's the way things are. But it's kind of weird in a paradoxical way, because things are the way things are because the market is not big enough. But the market is not big enough because people don't do things there here or in the language of Spanish. So yeah. I mean, I hope that changes now that WotC is bringing the books.
It could really bring about a lot of changes. So I'm hopeful too. Well, I for sure want to talk about your article, which is called Losing Our Religion, and it presents subclasses for Forsaken clerics and warlocks. And how did you come up with this idea of clerics and warlocks that had literally lost the thing that defines them, right? Their connection to their deity or patron. Where did this come from?
I am just very contrarian when I play games. So like, I'm the kind of player where it's like, hey, I want to play a cleric, but like, I want to have a god. To be honest with you, though, the idea, began from one of our games, one of the games set in this world that I was creating. The world that I run and the games that I run, because it's based sort of in folk tales and mythology from Latin America, which has roots in Aztec and Maya myths. Like the gods for that I run in my games are very fallible, and they are very they're not very kind of like approachable, and they screw up a lot of times. So the theme of people just looking at their god and going like, I don't want to be friends anymore has come up more than once.
I'm no longer following you on God Twitter.
Yeah. So it came a couple of times to the point where, in the world that I was working, basically we have a continent that is very heavily and has been very heavily shaped by the gods. And then, to counter that, in the larger world outside of Ixalva, I made a distant land, which is only mentioned by name, where basically people got fed up with the gods and just imprisoned them all in slumber, and they maintained them sleeping through faith. So they basically turned the faith against their gods, and now they clerics exist and are very important there, but they're important because they don't want their gods to sort of like get out of control. And that was the source, like the seed for the idea, for the article. I brought this to Arcadia because while working on our setting, this was something that wasn't very sort of like, as I said, it's kind of like an extended thing that is kind of in the background. And we didn't really have a way to include it in the core product that we were working on. So, when James approached me for a pitch, I sort of explained the idea to him and he liked it. So it, out of that sort of like single cleric idea, all of the other ideas with the other cleric and the warlocks kind of like expanded. Yeah.
So we've got here, these are 4 subclasses, 2 cleric, 2 warlock. And then you have some example NPCs and retainers, which are part of the rules for strongholds and followers. So the clerics include the anathema domain, which is basically your deity scorns you and expels you from the clergy. Yeah. And this causes you to have sort of like some neat things. Like you have the idea of sort of being anti that religion in a lot of ways. So your channel divinity is divine derogation, and you can reduce healing and reduce radiant necrotic damage.
Some of the people that looked at it on Twitter, and that was my favorite part of it, by the way, like seeing people's reactions and sort of like interpreting them. And one of them was like, this this is a guy so cursed that literally curses everyone around them and has learned to use them to his advantage. And that, I love it. And it's amazing. That is the concept. It's someone that is literally cursed by the gods, but has learned to sort of like direct that anger towards others.
And you can break the rules, right? You can dip into the forbidden teachings because you're no longer bound.
Correct. Yeah.
So a core thing you get is Bane as a bonus action, which is the reverse of the Bless spell. And then it gets stronger over time, which I really love because I like Bane anyway, but making Bane like easier and more powerful, it's just really great.
Yeah. The entire idea was kind of like my initial concept was an anti-bard. I initially had it so this class had its own kind of like cutting wordsy type of situation. Then I looked at Bane and I was like, I mean, that is very thematic of the cleric and doesn't get a lot of, doesn't get to shine a lot unless you're playing sort of like an evilish or sinisterish cleric. So yeah, I wanted to turn that into.
And then I really love this second concept, which is the atonement domain. So this is the idea that you messed up, and now you're trying to atone and sort of get back through a second chance with your god. And I just think that's the best role playing concept.
Yeah. This one I had to. This one kind of like came out of a need to have a class for those who wanted to get like back on track. Right. I couldn't have everyone be like. Emo, just anti-god. So this one, the concept is basically that you either your god sets you on a path of redemption and says like, do this and then I'll forgive you, or you approach another god, which is a redeemer god, to intercede for you. And the way that this class is presented, it could be something that the player uses until they get back to the grace of their god, or something that they just, they become eternal seekers of redemption. But it's really just cool. What they are now.
So you have Selfless Reprieve, which is that when you and other party members are affected by something and you would make a saving throw, you can just automatically fail and then grant one ally the chance of success. And this grows in power as you level. And then your Channel Divinity is Shield of Martyrdom, which has a reaction you can take damage that would drop an ally, and that's very powerful.
Yeah.
Cool. Warlock options. So you have two here, the Swindled and the Compound. The Swindled is, this is such a Warlock thing. You stole power from your patron, and you kind of know that your patron might come after you someday because you're kind of stealing the power.
Yeah.
You're not paying for cable.
Yeah, exactly. The warlocks, the reaction that I saw to the warlocks was really divided, and not in a bad way. Some people just really, really gravitated to the Swindle. That was their favorite class in the whole article, and some really gravitated to the Compound. And some people even thought like, hey, I wish the Compound was what the warlock is. Like, instead of having one patron, you just make pacts with all sorts of entities. But the Swindle is this kind of like roguish warlock, which I think is one of the things that hasn't been. Warlock has the thing where they have room to emulate other classes, and they've done that in the past, but they haven't touched on roguish archetypes. So.
Yeah, and what I really like here is that sometimes when a class is like another class, like I'm thinking of the cleric when you're a nature cleric, it's kind of like, well, why not just play through it?
Yeah,
like what's the point here? Especially when you start getting spells that are like a druid, then it's like, well, what are we doing here? But this has constant thread through it of how you are doing this bad deed around magic and power, and so you have Eldritch Thieves tools, which are great, and they can reflect the nature of your patron. So there's a lot of flavor here that explains that you're not just some rogue, you're a different type of scoundrel and swindler.
I have a story behind this class. This class, the whole idea behind the Eldritch Thieves tools, it basically it occurred to me when one player who was playing in one of our games, he was playing an arcane trickster,
Love it.
and there was a magical trap that was very clearly just not mechanical. It was just a magic contraption barrier. And he asked if he could use his thieves tools to disarm it. And I was like, I mean, you're an Eldritch Thief. Yeah, just sure. I mean, and yeah, that's sort of, I started thinking about like, why? I mean, that's such a logical way. I mean, why didn't they think of that when the arcane trickster was created? It's so I basically,
because it's not just some lock.
Yeah,
you're more
correct. Yeah. So that's how this was born.
Yeah, and I like it. So you can even the spells that you access are things you're stealing from your patron.
Yeah.
You can disarm magical effects, which is what you're talking about. And then you gain a superpowered counter spell, which is really fun, that empowers you when you do it. You get temporary hit points and things like that. A lot of fun. The compound, the second warlock subclass, as you said, you draw from multiple patrons instead of one. And you're sort of dipping into these different patronages. And the way this is represented that I see here is under Council of the Many. You can gain a catalog, or you build up a catalog of skills, tools, and weapons that represent all these multitudes of teachings from the different patrons. And you get to choose each time you take a long rest, 2 of them that are active, which is a really neat idea.
Yeah, and this sort of reflects you speaking and conferring with your different patrons, right? This is sort of like the way of to represent this warlock having knowledge of all of these topics, at their disposal, but not available at all times. And I'll just say that I love the art that was made for this class specifically.
Yeah.
I commissioned I made the request for the art to be the way that it is, but it turned out beautiful. Like I never imagined that it would turn out so good. The art itself inspired the next feature, which is monthly support. Because I couldn't have tiny entities on the art and then not make them into mechanics. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah. So the idea that these, and the article kind of talks about how your various patrons, like you're maybe playing them off against one another, and they're maybe like fighting each other the way that gods do, right?
Yeah.
And so you're kind of pulling from these energies in amongst their sort of arguments, but you can, and they represent it as these like moats, that these tiny entities, and then they can manifest as you get to higher levels. So they can manifest and support you or support an ally, and then that grows with power as you get higher level. Like they can provide cover and things like that. Which is
this is the warlock that has a literal angel and a devil on their shoulder, and then many other things around.
Yeah, and like one of them's elemental, or 2 of them are elemental, and one looks sort of fey and then devilish, and it's really great. All these different, and then maybe a stone elemental one. It's really cool. And then the really like kind of bizarre, awesome capstone is this partition mind, where at 14th level you can concentrate on 2 spells at one time, and that's a feature I've always wanted to see. I don't know if it's shown up anywhere else, but that's a really neat idea.
I made a lot of research for this, and I was divided on it, and also like many of the people who have seen it have been hesitant about it, because I know I think in the Dungeon Master's Guide, I think Wizards has like a line which is, "Do not mess with concentration; it'll break the game." However, looking at the spells that a warlock gets, specifically the spells that are chosen for this warlock to be able to conjure, and just in general the warlock spell list, it didn't feel broken at all. And the fact that you still have to make concentration checks for both spells, that sort of, I think, balances it out. It went through playtesting. The playtesters thought it was okay. But still, many people are hesitant because of that line. Apparently, sure. I'm breaking
that line.
some sacred
oath.
oath.
14th level. I mean, to me, that's perfect. And so then we have two really neat NPCs with neat backstories. One is a scorned dwarven cleric, sort of an anathema domain, and then Rusio Sabhar, who is a half-elf swindler warlock.
Yes.
Really neat. So you get those stat blocks that you can use as NPCs, and then if you're playing with the strongholds and followers rules, you can use these retainers that you can employ, which is really cool. You get 4 there that can also be used, which is really neat.
And this is kind of like getting into the ground of your next question, but I'll just say right now, like working with James. It was just such an amazing experience, because originally my pitch for the article was just the classes. And then I think I initially pitched 2 classes, and then I was like, James, I think I think I expanded this to 4. Is it okay? And he was like, yeah, it's totally fine. And then he saw the classes, and he was like, hey, do you want to write NPCs and followers? And I was like, sure. I mean, yes. So the NPCs are basically extensions of the concept, and just trying to show what what the origin of one of these classes could be. And I don't think it's mentioned anywhere in the article, but like Misiri, the NPC Misiri is the default art for the anathema cleric, and Rusio is the art for the swindled warlock. So yeah, and and moving through to the followers, it was really neat just playing with that concept. I had personally never touched that part of the design. I had played with the classes that they were doing, the Illrigger and stuff like that, but I had never moved into the followers part of MTDM.
Yeah.
And looking at it and trying to come up with neat interactions in there was awesome.
Yeah, the signature attack and the special actions. And it's neat. They're neat rules. So I agree with you. It's great working with MCDM. Collaborating is fantastic. But how about designing subclasses in general? Do you find subclasses to be hard, easy? Like, I find them to be hard.
I guess it depends. I just move up and down on it. So when I start on them, I go through a process, which is like, what is missing, right? And this is like, am I creating something that already exists? And if so, can I bring that into the class? Like, is this a spell, or is this already a feature from another class? Is it a feat? And then, trying to do new stuff is hard, just in general. And trying to basically go through that process is difficult until you find something that clicks. And it's like, hey, I mean, maybe you don't have to reinvent the wheel, which is like, in the example of the anathema domain, you can just reflavor a spell and make it very cool. And that is a class, right? So basically I think the beginning, the concept sort of like stage is hard. But the way that I do it, or the way that I think about it, is always story first, before the mechanics even make sense. And so when I have the story and the concept, the mechanics soon follow after, right? I don't know if I have had this talk with you before. I remember having it with someone else, but I can't remember. So I think of the rules of the game, 5e in particular, as kind of like a programming language, right? Which is like, once you know the words for the rules of the game and you know what you want to do, you'll eventually get there. There's going to be a lot of like debugging along the way, which is like, nope, this is wrong. This is not working and stuff like that. But eventually, if you know where you want to get to, you'll get there if you know the words and the rules of the game, which is, I guess, the way that I do it.
That's really wise. So, what are your current streaming projects that you are doing?
Oh, streaming wise, we are on the last. Well, first, I want to say that streaming I still do in Spanish. Basically, it's kind of tiring just in general to sort of like, specifically in role playing scenarios, because the shows tend to be like 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4 hours long. It's very tiring to just like constantly be turning my brain in English. Like we talked at the beginning of the stream that how difficult that is, but it's so I do only Spanish for now. I don't know if that's going to change in the future, but what I have right now is we have a game on Thursdays, which is we're going through Descent into Avernus right now, heavily modified for 15th level characters that we've been carrying around since level 1. And we are in the last part of that adventure. It's nearing the finale. And we have Trece Albas on Saturdays, which is also like coming to a close very soon. And those are the two just major things that I have right now.
And do you have thoughts for what you'll do after those shows yet?
I don't yet. I have some things on the table, but I I'm at a point where I need to sort of like, where before the shows were, the focus of what I was doing. Right now, I'm at a point where if I have to sort of like organize people and sort of like try to schedule everyone so that everyone makes it, it's kind of hard. So while I would like to sort of like organize a new thing with new players and something completely I guess new, to repeat the word, it's kind of hard for me at the moment, but I guess we'll see where I am next year. Yeah,
it's hard work. How about on the design side? Is there anything that you can announce currently, or is everything secret currently?
Well, James spoiled my next article for Arcadia. Well, he didn't spoil it. He made me spoil it. Like, yeah. Well, when we had the designer talk on Matt Colville's channel the other day, and he just revealed that I was working on something else for them. I'm doing another article. It's also very long. It's a lot of stuff. It's also, this one is kind of like more story focused. I wanted to sort of like, do something different than the very mechanically focused classes. So this one is more story focused, and it's inspired by the movies of Guillermo del Toro. And yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be creepy. And well, people who have seen it so far are digging it. So yeah, I hope people like it. Cool. And other things, I have worked on something for WotC. I'm not allowed to say what it is yet. It's coming out next year, and it's going to be good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. That's so good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really neat. And I'm happy for you, and I'm happy also for other people who will look at that and go like, all right, it's possible, right? The dream is out there.
Thank you, first of all, for singing my praises when you mentioned, at the beginning. I think you were one of the first to actually see sort of like stuff that I was doing. And, when we were working on that thing for the Beholder, I was very hesitant just in general. I mean, I still am just showing people things that I've done and that I haven't shown anybody else. It gets easier over time, but it's never nothing. Yeah.
No, you're always wondering, what are they going to say?
Exactly.
What do they think?
Yeah.
And how about on Ixalba? Like, how are you? Do you continue to work on that campaign setting with the idea of someday releasing it in Kickstarter?
Yeah, Ixalva is basically something that I'm like doing as an ongoing thing. I basically, we have the base of what the game is going to be. I basically just need to finish the minutia, I guess. And from the text side, it's pretty much ready to be sort of like kickstarted. I guess, like, not like Kickstart and then we'll give you the product the day that it's funded, like you mentioned.
Only ENWorld does
that. But no, I mean, it's at a point where if we do a Kickstarter, we'll have something significant to show about the product, and it's pretty advanced in terms of that for the campaign itself. We, the barriers right now for it is that we're still finishing the art, which is kind of like a big initial investment for it. And that cost is being handled by my publisher, which is Miguel Espinosa, who successfully did a Kickstarter campaign in the past for Nahual, another Mexican RPG. And he was the one who approached me to start, writing this officially, and basically removing any excuse that I had for why I'm not publishing.
Now you gotta do
it. So he was like, "You just write, I'll take care of everything." And I was like, "Okay." So yeah, he's the one, covering that, and also Marisa from Magpie Games is the one handling art direction. She's been amazing. Awesome. She has brought in very talented artists and already has shown us some pictures that are awesome, and once everything related to that, of the visual side of the campaign, which is very important, is taken care of, I guess we'll move on to show it. I'll let you know. You'll be the first to know once it's out.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good question. How can people find you and keep track of your work in whichever language or both?
I guess if you want to follow my projects, what I'm doing in writing and when things get published, you can follow me on Twitter as Elwarius. And if you want to see my streams in Spanish, you can find me on Twitch as Elwarius as well.
Cool. That's ELWARIUS.
Yeah, I thought about spelling it, but I was like, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah, that's why I did it.
Thank
so
you.
If I messed up, you could say, no, wait, that's wrong. Fantastic. Thanks so much for being on the show and stepping in for Shawn on short notice. Greatly appreciated. Wonderful job in Arcadia, and I am super looking forward to the next things that you...
Thank you. It was lovely to be here, and always a pleasure to talk to you, and yeah.
Same.
Hopefully we can chat again.
We can play together soon. All right. Take care.
All right.